Well, my original thought about the Wicker Man, and I thought this made very good sense from the description of the Wicker Man. It's very, very vague. There are only a couple of descriptions, and they're in Roman writers, and I think one probably comes. I know Caesar mentions it, and there are means of human sacrifices here and there. But I think there's only like actually two, maybe three specific mentions of the Wicker Man, and they might have just been copying Caesar or copying each other. So there isn't a lot of information on Celtic human sacrifice in general or the Wicker Man in particular. Apparently there's a couple of coins that show it might be a Wicker Man. It's really hard to tell. So the archaeologists get all excited about an interpretation of something, but it's just a coin with a little finger on it. I mean, at the end of the day, so very little. So if there was such a thing, and it wasn't just anti-Celtic propaganda, you know, the Romans were already barbarian cults and stuff. And another aspect of the Roman-Celtic relationship was that Druidism was seen as the informing ideology, religion, cultural framework of all the Celtic peoples. The Druids were their priests, no matter what Celtic tribe, group, and now they're trying, there's no cult, it was just like a bunch of new, whatever. They all spoke similar language, and they all had the same priesthood, the Druids. The Druids were the only religion, except for Christianity, that the Roman Empire actively persecuted. That's really, the Romans hunted down Druids. The island of Mona, they actually invaded, was the Druid, it was a religious island. I don't think it was overly important militarily or anything, but it was the center of the Druidic religion in the island, as they would say, the islands of Britain. It was, I think, basically it was a little island in the Irish Sea somewhere, so you could go from Ireland or Scotland or England there, the three major Celtic areas at the time. And the Romans invaded it and just completely destroyed, cut down the groves, all the Druids. They were constantly destroying Druid groves. Druidism was illegal. And, very interesting. They only otherwise did that with Christianity. And I guess they figured it worked pretty good with Druidism. But and this could be seen as understanding that there was a basic paradigm to the Celtic outlook. But anyway, human sacrifice was one of the things that the Romans, that the Greeks, the later Greeks anyway, were like, human sacrifice is terrible, displeasing to the gods. That was the story of Tantalus. If you remember Tantalus, who was always being tantalized in the afterworld. He could never have anything to drink, and he could never have anything to eat, because he served the gods human flesh. In other words, that he made a human sacrifice to the gods. And this was seen, at least by classical times, as the worst horror you could do. And so saying that the Druids were carrying out bloody human sacrifices, captured Roman soldiers in their groves, that's right up there with, people, Germans roasting babies on bayonets in Belgium in like 1914 or whatever. It's just war propaganda. So, but that being said, if it was a wicker sacrifice, then why would they always, of course it's more dramatic, but why would they always show it as the Wicker Man standing upright? Because if you feel a Wicker Man standing upright, they always feel like 10, 20 foot high, these huge Wicker Men, 30 foot high, and you put people in there. I mean, you had platforms for them to stand on, they're all kind of mush up down towards the bottom. I don't think many of them would live that, especially the ones on the bottom, probably wouldn't survive long enough to actually have a decent when they're burning, because they'd all be crushed and everything. So why wouldn't the Wicker Man be lying flat on its back when it was burned? It would burn a lot easier, a lot more quickly. It wouldn't have trouble with combustion. And that's the way you would generally sacrifice a human being. I mean, I don't know that we have any classical images of human sacrifice, but we do clearly if they stretch someone out on their back, usually with an assistant priest at each limb, and the fifth priest wielding the knife. And which is, that's a different kind of a job description for priests back then, I guess, than priests. I remember reading somewhere basically priests were butchers. Right. Because, I've talked about this before, religion at that time, sacrifice meant sacrificing like a cow or a sheep and then sharing the meat out with the community. So it was a way of feeding people as well, and it was up to the priest to make all the cuts. So actually they had to know a lot about animal anatomy. And interestingly enough, and this is from, I think, every tradition, in the Mediterranean, the priest's always got a special cut of meat. Well, I'll just take this nice little bit here for me, and after that, and I know reading this particular data about this the ancient Greeks, they just basically chopped it up and say, here you go, here you go. So you waited in line if you were a poor person, and you might get a nice chunk, or you might get a lot of gristle. You didn't quite know, but you would take it home and cook it. But the priest made sure he cut himself a very nice little flank steak or something, or filet mignon. They usually had their own particular cut. Usually I think it was like on the shoulder or something like that the priest would get. But anyway, no, I thought, well, why shouldn't the Wicker Man be lying down flat? It would make a lot more sense. Even if the images on the coin are showing a Wicker Man, it could be on its back as well as standing up. Standing up is a lot more dramatic, though. But, you know, if you're going to burn a human sacrifice in a big wicker container, it seems to me to make a lot more sense to do it with the wicker container all of the same uniform height from the ground and the fuel. Because otherwise, and then the other thing is, if it's made out of wicker, you've got to burn it all the way to the top. And in theory, you've got people and animals and stuff up at the top. But how are you going to keep the flames going? Wicker is only going to burn. It's just wicker, for goodness sake. People are going to get escape. They're going to fall out. On the other hand, if a Wicker Man laying down flat on a nice bed of fuel, and a lot of people standing around in a circle with long sticks to poke people back in to try to get out. Now, that was my idea. But then I started with my Fraser. And he was talking about other wicker sacrifices that are documented in more modern times. And one of them I thought was interesting was a tower made of wicker. Not very tall, like 8 or 10 feet, but still. And they would put snakes in this and light a fire under it and draw snakes upward until they wiggled out of the top and into the fire. Very pleasant. And they also did this with other animals as well. Sometimes.
Why?
And these were well, probably because it's a survival of a pagan custom. But they had some kind of a local, in quote, tradition. Like there was one where they would kill a cat or cats, and it's like a primitive scapegoat thing. Well, this is representing the devil. It's the devil's animal. It's a witch's cat, whatever. Anything with the snakes are evil. They're, the serpent, Garden of Eden, all that kind of stuff. So the excuse was given that this was good Christian practice, and it was a way of, basically denigrating the archfiend. But in fact, we know that there's absolutely nothing in Orthodox Christianity, not even the Judaism from which it took so much, that has anything to do with building wicker towers and putting snakes in them and burning it and having the snakes jump out the top. This is obviously something left over from a much earlier tradition that probably did have some kind of religious significance, and at one time may have included humans. So these accounts of upright wicker containers made me think of that, but still, I think my original objections are quite valid about trying to actually burn something full of people in a wicker container. People don't burn easily. That was one of those things that they were trying to perpetuate with the idea of massive incineration of bodies. It takes hours to burn a human body completely. And a little cage of wicker is not going to do the job, especially if there's a lot of other bodies around to soak up the heat. It'd be like putting a hunk of meat in the oven that's too hot. The outside would get scorched, the inside would be raw. And, it'd be covered with wicker ash. So I just think that, the way to test it would be to build a big Wicker Man and fill it with, meat. I wouldn't put humans or animals in there, but you could just bunch of beef or this or that, bologna, cold cuts, fill the thing up, put it on a big pile of fuel, light it, and see what happens. And I would bet $1 that it would not burn very well.